Welcome, bienvenue to Quartiers Lointains, celebrating International Women's Day, celebrating Quartiers Lointains, the short film series and conversation following with Fan Sissoko.
Federation of AF-USA is the largest Alliance Française network in the world, helping 25,000 learners of French each year learn French, live French, and love French with the Alliance Française. Please visit our website at afusa.org for a list of all of our wonderful upcoming events. We have other film events, as well as events on history and authors. We have also Adrian Leeds coming up in May. So please, more information and registration link is at afusa.org. Logistics and format, please stay on mute during the presentation. Stay on speaker view so that you get the best view. Feel free to put your questions in the chat. And if there are any technical issues like we just saw, please feel free to sign out and log back in with the same Zoom link. The event is being recorded to share on our national YouTube channel, and the total runtime is 1 hour. Let me see, is Renee back in? No, she's not able to be back yet. She must be logging back in. So today, Renee Ketchum, who will be back with us in a moment. She's the managing director of Focus on French Focus on French Cinema Film Festival, and she's also the president of the Alliance Française de Greenwich, and she's the chair of the Federation of Alliance Française USA Cultural Offerings Committee. And we have the great joy of introducing Fan Sissoko today. Fran is a French-Malian artist and filmmaker based in Reykjavik. She has a background in design for social change, and her work explores themes of migration, motherhood, avoidance, and neurodiversity. So, bienvenue, Fan. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us here today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to start off by telling us a bit about your background with the Quartiers Lointains Film Festival?
So Claire Diao, who runs Quartiers Lointains, she's also my distributor, the distributor for my film. And she's an amazing woman who is doing a lot for to distribute Pan-African cinema in Europe. And Quartiers Lointains is a series of events, of screenings, where every year, or I think every season, there's been 7 seasons now, she gets someone to curate a small selection of Pan-African films, and she gets those films to tour around Africa and the US and Europe.
That's wonderful. Merci beaucoup, Fan. And I know that you and Renee were going to have a discussion about your film. Would you like to start by giving us a bit of the background about how your film came to be?
Yeah, so I mean, this film was for me about trying to turn something quite painful and confusing into something beautiful. So it's fictional, but it builds really heavily on my experience as a Black mixed race person and an immigrant. So I was born in France, raised in Paris, to a Malian father and a French mother, but I've also lived in the UK and Ireland, and I now live in Iceland. And this film is about, raising a child in a country that just really doesn't feel like home, and trying to pass down a sense of belonging to my child when I myself don't feel at home anywhere. And it's also inspired by conversations I've had with other immigrants here in Iceland about how they relate to the really harsh Icelandic landscape. There's one conversation in particular with a woman who she kind of took up cold water swimming as a way to deal with the long winters and her anxiety about that landscape and about feeling stuck here. And so swimming felt like a really powerful metaphor for me to convey the character's journey. So that's kind of where the film came from.
Merci beaucoup, Fan. And what else can you tell us about how your film perhaps relates to the other films in the Quartiers Lointains series?
Mm-hmm. I mean, they're all in a way about displacement. Each and every one of them has kind of touches on belonging, and also about mental health and about the impact that not feeling like you belong has on your mental health. So that is the common theme, and it is also about transformation. And I think in some films it's more subtle than others, but it is about kind of finding some kind of acceptance. Yeah.
Merci. And what can you tell us? Can you tell us more about the role of women in your film, and in a lot more broader sense in the whole Quartier Lointain festival, and the links that you see there with your film and other films? And merci.
Yeah, I mean, so I can talk about how my film relates to the experience of being a woman, I guess. I mean, it's very simply about the experience of motherhood, and it's a film that a lot of women have told me they can relate to, and even without being immigrants themselves. And I think there is something quite universal about wanting to pass down the right feelings to your child. And it also touches on like mistreatment during pregnancy from the healthcare system, which I think a lot of women can relate to, especially Black women and women of color. And I think that's a theme that Anansi, one of the other films, touches on quite a lot. The idea of not necessarily being believed, your pain not being believed by the healthcare system. And kind of having to deal with that physical pain on your own.
Merci. Ben, do you have other projects that are in the works along that theme, or other new themes that you're exploring?
So I'm currently working on my next animated short. It will be a longer short because this one is very tiny, and it will touch on similar themes. It's also about belonging. It's also about feeling like an outsider. It also features water really heavily, and it's called Hold It Together. And it's the story of a young woman who keeps going to the swimming pool here in Iceland, which is a very kind of culturally significant place, and who keeps melting. And so her challenge is going to try and stay solid.
I'm going to share just an image from your film. I know we can't share the whole film, but I just have one image here that I'd like to share. And then I notice, I don't know if it's a painting or a poster behind you that has a very similar feel. Can you tell us a bit about this image from the film and about the image behind you? Is there a connection?
Yeah, actually, the painting behind me is my mom painted this. It's a very different landscape. I think it's like supposed to be Scotland. But that image that you showed, it's a very specific place here in Iceland that I go to quite often. And yeah, I wrote that film really quickly, and I came up with the visuals also really quickly. And then the process of animating took a long time. But the visual and the setting came to me quite quickly. And yeah, so I just kind of went with it because it's only three or 4 minutes. So the setting is quite simple, the landscape is quite simple, but it's more about the emotional journey of the main character through the landscape that changes, and that has the drama.
do you feel, well, obviously you feel the same connection with water that your mother feels. Is it a theme that you've seen running throughout your life in all the different places that you've lived?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel really at home in water. I think in film, water is often used to signify changes or transformation. And I find this really interesting. Um, it's interesting because when I was working on this film, through the grant that I got, which is from an American organization called Art with Impact, we had access to a psychologist because all of the films that were selected touched on mental health. So through the process, I could have conversations with this psychologist. And one conversation that we had was like she helped me clarify what I wanted to say. And she kept referring to the sea and like what it means and why did I choose the sea and why did I choose the ocean. And she saw that as being a metaphor for the womb, and seeing that main character who is trying to belong, who is kind of literally diving into the sea, kind of felt a little bit like a reference to how maybe a baby inside the womb just belongs and is not yet having to deal with all the different labels that are being projected on that baby. So that was really interesting to be able to clarify that, of having the sea as something that can hold us without judgment.
Absolutely, yeah. Merci, Fan. I see that Renee was able to connect again. Renee, I'll let you go ahead and ask some of your questions that you had for Fan.
Yes, Fan. I apologize. We've had some power issues here. But what question did you ask, Fan? And then I'd like to also give a little bit of background on the Quartier Lointains after we talk to Fan.
Yeah, you can give your background on the festival. We talked about how her film fit in with the theme of the other films and the theme of the festival, and talked about the theme of water running through her films and her life as well.
Okay, so Fan, I think we'll just continue with questions for you, and then I can give some background if you think that makes sense. What was the inspiration behind this film?
Yeah, so I think I went through that. We did answer this question. But yeah, I talked about kind of wanting to turn a really painful experience into something beautiful, and gave a bit of background about why.
So as so can you have you spoken yet about the themes of motherhood and how immigration and motherhood are integrated? Yes.
Slightly, but I can elaborate on that. I think, like for me, there is a phrase that I've heard, and I don't remember what I've heard it, but which says that motherhood is like a foreign country. And I think when you become a parent, as well as when you move countries, you kind of lose a little bit of yourself. You kind of lose a little bit of your identity. Maybe the things that you've learned in the past you're kind of a little bit helpless with them, and you have to relearn a lot of skills, and you have to sort of relearn who you are and how you want to be in the world. So I think, to me, motherhood and immigration are a very similar journey. And when you bring the two together, or when you experience both at the same time, it just creates quite a strange feeling. Yeah.
Isabel, did you have a question?
You unmute me, Melissa. Thank you. Yes, I completely understand what you say, Fan, because I live the same thing. I moved from France to the US. My kids are born in France, but they were so little that they have no souvenir of school in France, so they grew up here. So the US are now the I would say not the second country, maybe more their first country. But you know, my concern was not for my kids, that I try to raise in both cultures, French and English. My concern is now that I have a granddaughter. I'm like, what would happen for her after us? Because I'm sure that I'm doing the job to transmit, but my kids, I'm not sure they will do that. So I think, you know, it's always a a concern, and that's very exile is something different, to live in another country and to become a citizen, and that's true. You're always losing something. So.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I think I really relate to what you're saying, although, she's only 6 years old, so I don't have any grandchildren yet. But my father came from Mali to France, and then I moved from France to Iceland. And my daughter is born in England, but is being raised in Iceland. And I cannot, I have that responsibility to pass down both the French culture and the Malian culture, but that's quite a big job to do at the same time as, her being Icelandic and fitting in the society here. So I relate to what you're saying about the generations.
But I think at the same time, it's also, I think that comment that you made about losing a bit of yourself is even more personal and more profound, because as mothers, and for those of us who are mothers in this group, you do lose a part of yourself when you bring somebody else into the world. So I think your movie profoundly affected the personal aspect, and I think everybody on this Zoom felt very strongly about that particular comment that you make about losing a part of yourself. The other questions that you and I discussed, did anything surprising come up in the process of making this film?
I mean, so I talked a bit about the process, but I wrote this film really quickly. I decided to write it as a letter to my daughter. I went into it. Usually with animation, you plan a lot. You plan every shot, and you know exactly what you're going to do when you go and do it. With this one, I didn't do that. And so some of the images just came up and emerged during the process. And I think they ended up being the most important images. Like, for example, when, she removes her clothes and then we see that her swimsuit is kind of see-through, or it's kind of like the negative space between her body. That came up almost as a mistake. And then I felt that it was just really fitting because she's really trying to fit into that landscape. And then that kind of gave birth to the image at the end where she kind of drifts away from herself and then kind of, comes back. So yeah, that was surprising, and that just came up kind of by chance, which is really nice when it happens.
It's a beautiful film. Have audiences surprised you in any way? Have they reacted? It, again, as I said, I think for a woman, it's a very emotional film to watch on very many levels. Have you had that kind of that input from audiences who have seen the series Quartiers Lointains?
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised by how many people told me that they either cried or had like a little knot in their throat when they watched it, because I mostly did this for my own self. I did this for my own healing. I did this as a kind of like a gift to my daughter. And it surprised me that it resonated even with not necessarily women, not necessarily mothers, and not necessarily immigrants. So there's something, I guess, a little bit universal about the feeling of not belonging. But the nicest feedback I had was that it felt a little bit like a hug, which, to me felt like, okay, I managed that. I managed to get some healing through that and to give it away as well.
Well, and I think that for the many women and men and couples that watch this, it is a hug, because it's not only your daughter is 6 years old, and you as we've produced our children, but you lose that part of yourself. You feel a stranger as they all grow through many stages in their lives, when they go through those horrendous years as teenagers. My daughter's getting married. As they progress, that as they grow, they become strangers to you. You become a stranger to them. You have it. it's a universal film, I think, in that respect. It covers, obviously, in your film here, it covers the birth of your child, but that whole process doesn't ever stop. It continues, and it continues, and your film will I think that's why you probably had this audience reaction. That we're embraced by the concept, and understand it and feel it so strongly. So that was sort of the end of my questions for you, but I wanted to thank you, and perhaps it would make some sense to give a little bit of background about the series, before we just so for the people that we have on the call. Melissa, do you agree?
Absolutely.
So again, I had, before we started this, again, this is the name of the series. It's Metamorphose, and we were so thrilled to be able to have, next slide, please, have Fan with us, and to present her film On the Surface. And then I just wanted to say that this particular series was launched in Paris at the Centre Pompidou by sponsor and marraine and very famous filmmaker Alice Diop. And that the 2023 season 7 includes 4 films under the title of Metamorphose, as you saw with that slide. And we were so thrilled today to welcome director Fan Sissoko. But I wanted to say a little bit about the program, because it's I think hopefully all of you really enjoyed the series of 4 films in the 7th edition. But it was created 10 years ago by journalist and programmer Claire Diao, honoring films produced by members of African diasporas and Afro-descendant communities. And each year, through this traveling program, Quartiers Lointains aims to promote high quality, often little known films whose content helps to break with traditional cliches, films repeated in the political sphere about realities that are really complex. And you see it in these 4 films, everything, and in the other series, Islam, the suburbs, immigration, personal transformation. And Claire says, and I quote, "Cinema as a laboratory for deep-seated desires, intimate anxieties, and the most troubled human relationships is one of the spaces for expressing these complex realities." This selection was an opportunity to discover some fascinating works, which each in their own way question the theme of this particular 7th season, Metamorphose. I hope everyone has watched the other 3 films in addition to Fans. But I also wanted to add that Alice Diop, who we also know is a very famous French filmmaker, underlined the value of Quartiers Lointains in terms of its programming work. She noted that it was particularly important in regard to women filmmakers. She says, "I'm delighted to see a generation of women taking hold of cinema as a means of expression. We can also point to the profound interest represented by this programming in a context where so-called identity issues lead to ideological dead ends. Each film in this series takes the human pulse of social groups that are too often caricatured," and I love that word, caricatured, "given a positive but ethical meaning to the concept of community. Behaviors are no longer defined or judged from a dull exteriority, but are approached in their specific, exceptional, rich interiority." And that all 4 of these films, while touching on the cultural diversity that makes up French society, create multiple points of identification. So I just wanted to be clear on how Claire, feels about these films, how we can all look at these films, and how your marraine, someone as highly thought of as a filmmaker, has supported Claire in this particular edition of Quartiers Lointains. So unless you have something else that you would like to share with us about your film, I'd like to see if anybody who's on the Zoom has any other questions. You can put them in the chat or raise your hand. We have a small group. Otherwise, if we have no questions, we want to thank Fan enormously from coming to us from Reykjavik. And for those of you who enjoyed the film, I'm sure there are many others, but with this crazy weather we're having on the East Coast where it's blowing 60 miles an hour, we may have lost some of our participants today. But Fan, thank you so much. We look so forward to hearing about future films. And would you like to tell us before we leave about any next in your upcoming films?
Yes, I did talk about it. Melissa asked me that.
Okay, already
So
asked you.
yeah, I'm working on a second animated short called Hold It Together.
Terrific. Okay, so we will re-record this in sequence, but we thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to hearing more about your new film and seeing your new film.
Thank you so much.